In this video, we're going to be taking a look at a little project that somebody inquired about how to convert it into an embroidery file using Inkscape and then converting it to embroidery with InkStitch. And I thought this would be a really great example because this is how I feel like it's best to learn is with an actual project. So even if you don't know anything about Inkscape or anything about InkStitch, you should be pretty successful with this little project. Now, if you have a design that you're looking to make, and you want a video demonstration on how we would go about tackling it, do feel free to send us the image, send us the size of the image that you want to make and so forth, all the details that you're looking for, and perhaps we can make a video demonstration on that. Our email address is in the video description below. And if you want this file for some reason, for your own project, you don't feel like making it yourself, feel free to send us an email and say, hey, I want the Mickey monogram, and we will send the file to you. So we'll send you the Inkscape file so you can see how it's made and then export it to whatever embroidery file format you need. So what we're going to do first of all is import our artwork. So we hit File, Import. And let's see here, where is it at? Where is it at? There it is. That's what we're trying to make right there. Okay, so we'll go ahead and click OK and import that. Now what they're looking to do is they're looking to make this about 3 inches, and then they want to add a little monogram here for the granddaughter. So that's what we're looking to do, but we need to first convert this into embroidery stitches. And of course, because of the size and just the style of the design, we want to convert this into satin stitches. And there's a variety of ways to accomplish this task, but we're going to show you what I feel like will probably be the easiest way. So, so the first thing we need to do is we need to convert this into, because right now we just have an image, it's just a JPEG file. So we need to convert this into a vector. So we do that by clicking on this little icon here. You see that little green icon? That's our trace bitmap function. Now if you don't have that, you could just click your little down arrow here, and that is in the basic category here, and you see there it is, trace bitmap. So you can get to it both ways there. All right, so there it is. And then typically we'll use this threshold, this brightness cutoff option. And then as we lower the threshold, you can see now we have nothing. But as we move it over here all the way to the other extreme, then it'll be solid black. So as soon as we see our image the way we like it, then we could go ahead and hit apply. Now these things here, the speckles and the smooth corners and the optimize, they can change the output a little bit. But it's really, I don't know, to me it's not a lot different. So I don't really mess with it too much unless I don't get the result that I want. But anyhow, just click apply, and you see over here on the left hand side nothing really visually changed. So here is the vectorized version, and we could see that because now we have all of our lines. Okay. So how do we go about converting this? Well, I've given it some thought of how I would go about doing it, and probably the easiest solution is to kind of break it down a little bit for you. Can we just use fill to satin and convert everything in one go? Absolutely, you can. I'm going to suggest that we take a little bit extra work here and cut this up a little bit, and to me, hopefully it will simplify it a little bit. And even if it doesn't truly simplify it for you, at least you'll be like, oh, okay, that's just another approach. So how am I going to do this? Well, I call it the chop suey method because it's really easy. So all we're going to do is grab our pen tool. And the pen tool is the B key on our keyboard. We can go all the way over here and select it as well. But I'm just going to come up here and I'm going to slice through this corner. Okay. Now, initially, we don't have to be too accurate. I'm going to right click, and then we can go into our node tool, which is the letter N, and then we could really fine tune it. So I need to be right there, and I do not want to be crossing over there, and I need to be right there. Okay, so that's step one. And then I'm going to come over here and do the exact same thing over here. So grab my pen tool, click there, right click to exit out of the pen tool. And so now I have these two lines, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select them both by, I have one, and then I hold my shift key down to select the second one, and then we're going to go to path and combine. So we'll go to path and combine here. Now, you see that keyboard shortcut of Control K? That is one you're definitely going to want to put to memory because we use it all of the time. So it's just easier than going to the menu every time. So now you can see that those are now combined, and if we look at our layers palette, you see we have one path, the original Mickey path, and then our original image. And so that's what we want. Okay, so these are the cutters, and then we're going to shift click on the Mickey outline, and then we're going to come up here and choose path, and we have all these different things that we can do. We can combine, we can break apart, we can cut, etc., etc., etc. But you notice if we choose division here, it says cut the bottom path into pieces, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. So you can see our keyboard shortcut. Please put that to memory. It's just going to be a real time saver for you. So the keyboard shortcut to do that is Control and /. Okay, and now you will see that those purple lines went away, but you can see it is in fact chopped right where we chopped it. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and I just want to go through that exercise one more time for you just for fun, not necessarily out of necessity. But let's go right up here. I'm going to cut these little pieces of the bow. I'm going to cut those separate. Okay, just again, not because it's entirely necessary, but just to go through the exercise. So click there, and let's go ahead and turn on snapping. That can be helpful in this situation. Click there. We'll come down here. We'll click there, and then right click. So you see that kind of weird line. And then let's do the same thing. Click here, snap right there, snap right there, there. We'll come down here, there, and there. Okay? So again, we have those two lines, and then we're going to shift click the second line. And then what's the keyboard shortcut? You're right, Control K to combine. And then we're going to take our outline, shift click our outline, and then remember what the chop suey is, Control /. Boop. Okay. So you see how much quicker that is if we're just using our keyboard shortcuts. And now you can see that that's separate, and now that's separate. Okay. Now, just for simplicity, let's go ahead and turn off the visibility of that one, and let's go ahead and turn off the visibility of that one. So this is what we have. We have that whole top piece and this bottom piece. Okay, so I did this purposely just to show you. Again, this is not how I would probably typically do it, but I just wanted to show you that we can do it this way, and hopefully maybe it simplifies it for you. I don't know if it does or not, but let's just run through it. Okay, so now we have kind of the basics of what we need to convert this into satin stitches, and it's really, really straightforward. So first things first, let's just grab our pencil tool, and in this case, pencil, not the pen, although you could use the pen, but the pencil tool, and all we're going to do is just create some rungs, okay? So there you go, there's rung number one, and you don't have to get crazy with this. The more that you use this tool, I feel like let's turn off snapping for a moment. The more you'll understand exactly how many rungs you have to add. I am going to deliberately not add too many rungs. So you see here, there's one rung there, one rung there. I just put a random one there just for fun, and there's one here on the bottom. I feel like we don't need any more than that, okay? So let's just see if I'm correct. So we'll go ahead and select this. Now I have a keyboard shortcut for, we're going to do fill to satin, okay? Fill to satin. So I have a keyboard shortcut for that, but let's show you how to get to it in the menu. So choose extensions, InkStitch, and we'll come down here and you'll see the satin, and then you see fill to satin. Okay, and you see where it says Shift Alt S. Okay, and that is the keyboard shortcut that we'll use going forward. Shift Alt S. But go ahead and choose that, and you get this dialog box. I don't click on any of those options. Then just choose Apply, and it will go ahead and convert that to satin stitches. Now, the one thing I just realized, the one thing that we didn't do, and I was wondering why it's taking so long. Well, that's because this thing is absolutely gigantic. So let's turn everything on and let's resize this to an actual size that we're actually going to use, which in this case is about 3 inches. So my bad. So let's do let's do the width about 3 inches. Okay, so now that's the actual size, and then they're going to do the monogram inside of that. Okay, so there you go. And that's, of course, one nice thing is you're going to be able to just scale this to whatever size you want once you get it converted. So I just want to take a look at these satin stitches to begin with. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at that in params. Now, I was fixing to use my keyboard shortcut, but I remember you're not set up like I am. So we'll go into InkStitch here, extensions, InkStitch params, but you see I do have a keyboard shortcut of Control-Alt-P. And the more you use those keyboard shortcuts, the more they just become absolutely second nature to you. But one thing I just really wanted to point out here is you notice that we have perfect satin stitches all the way around. Okay, so we don't need to add a lot of rungs, especially around circles. Circles don't require a lot of rungs. Now, other shapes can require a lot of rungs. And in fact, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to delete this rung over here, okay? Because I just want to show you the difference between that, and let's go ahead and delete this rung for fun, okay? Now, this is one thing that does frustrate me a little bit, is when we use that fill to satin tool, do you see how you have 150 million nodes? Well, I don't really think it's really required to have that many nodes, so I do go in and simplify it. Again, you don't necessarily have to do that, but I just like to do that. So now let's go ahead and look at it in params, and we'll look at the left and look at the right and see some differences here. So you see this right here? See how that's kind of weird right there? And you look over here and it's less weird. And that's because of the rung. Now, I do not like the way these satin stitches start going at a wacky angle. And I'm not wild about this right here. So let's go ahead and choose Apply and Quit. And I'll just show you how we can fix this, okay? So we have an existing path selected. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab our pencil tool and we're going to hold our shift key down. And by holding the shift key down, we can add to the existing path. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to just add a rung just a little farther down. Okay, see that? And then this one over here, we're going to switch to our node tool, which is, of course, the N key on our keyboard. And we're just going to move it down a little bit. And so what's going to happen is it's going to start from here and then more gradually go up. It's not going to be quite so blunt when it gets up top there. So just, just little things that you can play with, but you'll see what I'm talking about here momentarily. So you see how this is just a little less blunt up here? That's right where our rung was, and then it just slightly goes at an angle. Then over here, we have our rung, and then it slightly eases into that corner a little bit more. Okay, so you can play with that and really get it all perfected if you really want to. Now, this is the fun part, is how do we go about stitching this? Well, it's the same process that I just showed you, but you just have to play with this a little bit and really understand how that fill to satin works. And once you get it, man, you're off to the races. It's going to be really, really simple for you. So the first thing that we have to think about is, well, how do I want this to stitch? Well, obviously we want a satin all the way around here and a satin all the way around here, and essentially the bow is going to be on top. So this satin is going to be continuous all the way around the bow. Okay, so how do we tell InkStitch that that's what we want, continuous? Well, this is how we do it. So we're going to grab our pencil tool, and you see this gap? We have to tell InkStitch, no, I don't want this gap here. So if I click here and right click, that adds a rung. Then we add a rung down here, and then we create a bridge. Done. Okay, so that tells InkStitch that's how we want it to be. Now, I think it's smart to add a rung here. I think it's smart to add a rung here. And then we got to do the same thing over here, where that gap is. Then we got to add a bridge. And it's real important that your bridge does cross over your rungs. That part's important too. And it's also important that our rungs cross over both of our rails. These will become rails. So that's important. And let's just continue on here. So we'll go ahead and add a rung there. And that's it. We don't need another rung. And again, once you kind of play with this a little bit, you'll know when you need to add more rungs and so forth. I will go ahead and add a rung down here where I kind of visually see there should be a corner there, so to speak. You know, we have a little, what I call a mountain here, so we could add a rung on either side of that. I typically will. If there's a curved area, I typically will kind of define that. Now this, not so much, okay? InkStitch will figure this out by itself. It would probably figure this out by itself too, but if we add some rungs, it does help define it just a little bit for us. All right? So this first part would convert perfectly. No issues. We'll see that here momentarily. Now, we haven't defined this over here. So we're going to have to do that too. So let's click that and that. Okay? Just like we did over here. We want to ease into that corner. And then over here, we have to do something a little bit different. We have to tell InkStitch what we're doing here. So we're going to come in here and just imagine drawing an imaginary line straight across. An imaginary line straight across. And then we're going to add another one here. Okay, and then we're going to add a bridge. Okay, now what's important here? Well, again, just imagine this line. So what InkStitch is going to do is it's going to, because of this line right here, where that connection point is and that line is, it's going to draw a perfectly straight line. It's going to draw a perfectly straight line. And then, so these satin stitches are going to be slightly overlapping because of where we place that line. So we're going to do the same thing over here. So pretend we're just going to keep going. We're going to go boop. And we'll come down here. And all of this can be changed later once we do the conversion. So that part's not that important. But wherever that crossing point is, it's going to draw a straight line to there and extend this rail, boom, to there. Okay, that's what it's going to do. Now, let's go ahead and add a rung over here, I think. And I don't think we need a rung any more than what we already have. So we're good to go. We're good to go to as far as converting this top half. So let's do it. Let's go ahead and select everything. Now remember, Shift-Alt-S is fill the satin for me. So let me make sure I have it all selected here. Shift-Alt-S. And you see, it brings up fill the satin. And I go ahead and click apply. And there you go. Now it's all been converted. Now let's look at the result here. So see what I was talking about? That inside line goes away, but remember I said it's going to draw a straight line from where that crossed over, and it kind of extended those rails, and you can see that. Here, it did the same thing. So this segment right here, you notice it is, let's go to our node tool, it is straight. So we could just boop, and that's make that a little bit more curved, and then we'd want to do the same thing over here. Just round that over, okay? But so you see how these rails are slightly extended, right? And that's what we want. That's exactly what we want. So everything else looks good. Now visually everything looks good. Now I do see an issue here. Did catch that. Not quite sure why it did that. So over here it did okay with the connector here. Now we will have to probably modify that slightly. So really what we want is we want that and that. That would be more ideal, that those two connect like that. But over here, it dropped out, okay? Um, I don't really worry too much about that. Um, it is something we have to be mindful of, but it's easy enough to just to extend that and fix that really easily. Now again, this has all of those nodes, so we could go to path and simplify. Remember that is Control L. And see how many nodes there are there? We could even do that a second time if we really wanted to simplify it. Okay, so now we've really simplified it. I'm going to undo that, what we just did. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe we're okay. Let's just go ahead and do Control L. And that really greatly reduces the number of nodes. Okay, that's a bit more manageable now. So now let's go ahead and take a look at this and see. One other thing I guess we should talk about is stitch order. First of all, I'm going to ungroup this. Got all that in a group, and I don't want it in a group. So let's talk about stitch order. How do we want this to stitch out? Well, I want to start with this object, and then this, and then this, and then our bow. Okay, that's the order I want this to stitch in right now. But so what we're going to do, it's not in that order right now, so we're going to select that, hold our shift key down, and select the next piece in our sequence, the next piece in our sequence, the next piece in our sequence, and then if we go up here to extensions, choose InkStitch, choose edit, choose restack objects in the order of the selection. And then when we do that, you'll see that now we have those first two still turned off, but the bottom one is the left ear, the face, the right ear, and the bow. Now, if you wanted to, it's not a terrible idea for us to just double click on our layer names and give them some type of definition. I typically would, because if I open up this file later on, I could just take a quick glance and I see exactly what in the what is what. Okay? Not necessary, but sometimes helpful. So now let's look at it in params. Of course, I'm using my keyboard shortcut Control-Alt-P. Try to avoid the menus at all possible. But you can see how it's all going to stitch out. And it all looks perfect, right? Exactly like we expected. And just so we can see, we've got a couple of stitches over, and then our satin stitch is going to come on over. Okay? Now, we haven't talked about compensation or the push-pull compensation or underlay or anything like that up to this point. But we're going to get there. So let's choose apply and quit. So we have that one last piece of the interior bow. But I want to show you something here, and let's talk about this a little bit. So let's grab our measure tool. It's the M key on our keyboard, and we're going to click here and drag and just see how wide our satin column is. And you see our satin column is only 1.85 millimeters, and that's very, very small, very small for a satin column at 3 inches. Okay, and this is really going to come into play when we do this next portion, because these are even smaller than that. These are microscopic. Okay, so you see there, that is let's pull a line over there. Barely a millimeter. It's not even a millimeter. It's 0.75. So that is very tiny. Okay. Now, why is this important? Well, because really the rule of thumb, the hard rule, the hard and fast rule is a millimeter. Anything less than a millimeter in satin stitches is not going to stitch very nice. I typically try to stay at 1.5 millimeters. All right. Now, are there some things that we can do to mitigate this issue? Yes. there is, so we don't have to necessarily stick with that one rule, but just in general, your satin columns, if they can be at least a millimeter, that's ideal. All right. If we're going to go smaller than that, and we can, it's not advisable, we could, but then we should really slow our machine down because if it's going, my machine stitches at 1,200 stitches a minute, and if it's binging back and forth in less than a millimeter space, that is going to be probably cause for alarm. But for right now, let's just go ahead and convert this just as it is, and you could think about doing something different later. So there's different ways that we could change up the design a little bit. We could make this wider. We could simplify it. We don't have to have this little piece on the side. I mean, there's different things we could do to simplify the design. But let's just go ahead and convert it just the way it sits. So we have a similar issue. We want this to stitch, and then we want this to stitch, and then we want this to stitch, and then we want this to stitch. So how are we going to achieve this? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our pencil tool, and we have to tell InkStitch cover the gap. So there is our line there, there is our line there, and there is our line there. And then remember, we're going to come to the inside here, like so. Come down here. Okay. Same exact configuration as we did previously. So cover the gap, bridge the gap, come to the inside here. This is where the rails are going to be extended to, and connect those two for the bridges. And I probably will come right over here and we're going to just nip it right there. See how it's just barely crossing over? That's what we want. And do the same thing over here. Barely crossing over. Boom. All right. And now we can go ahead and convert those bits of the bow. So we could just come in here and select all of that. Okay. So these are all the paths that we just created. And then these are the original two pieces of the bow. So let's go in and Shift Alt S. That's our fill the satin, and hit apply. Okay, let's look at the result that we got, because we're going to have to redo it. I think that's the simplest thing, because see how this dropped out up here and dropped out up here? So let's do that. I kind of forgot, that's kind of an unwritten rule a little bit. When you're dealing with satin columns, always cap it. So, and I didn't do that. Okay, so we're just so you always want to rung at the ends. Okay, and so here, even down here, so we would go ahead and just add that rung. Okay, and then down here, we always should add the rung, and I forgot that step. All right, and then that won't happen to you. We added the rungs here to cap those, but we didn't cap these. So now we got it. Now we got it figured out. So again, we're going to select all those. They are in a different layer, but we're going to go to Shift Alt S, hit apply, and now that will convert the way we anticipated it to. So if we look at it here, yes, you can see perfect, perfect, perfect. Everything's perfect. Everything looks good. And you can see how these rails were extended in, so that's good. And over here, you see how these rails are extended in. Now you see these are a little, for lack of a better word, sloppy. But that's okay. We can, we could fix this. So let's first of all simplify our nodes. And then I'm just going to pull this up and pull this one up just so there's some overlap there. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. So we're going to go up like so, extend it just a little bit. We can go ahead and simplify those nodes as well. That's extended the way we need it to. And maybe even down here. So maybe we extend these just a little bit just so there's a little bit of overlap at that connection there. Okay. So yes. So now what we have to do, and this is you have to figure this out in any software. First of all, let's get rid of some groups. So I don't like to have groups after I've done my satning. So we'll get rid of those groups. And so now we're kind of back to where we were. So we have the left piece, and then the upright of our left piece, and then we have the right piece, and then the upright of our right piece, right? So I do want those to stitch first, I believe, and then we'll go ahead and stitch in order. So, for example, that's going to stitch, then that, then this, then that. Perfect. And then our left ear, our face, our right ear, a bow. Okay, and so this part of the process is probably one of the more challenging parts, is thinking about, well, how is this actually going to stitch out? How do I want this to stitch out? So first of all, let's handle some other business real quick on setting some params that we should set. So our left ear, our face, our right ear, and our bow. Let's go into params, Control-Alt-P. What are we doing here? Well, we're going to add some push-pull compensation. We are going to add some underlay. So I would probably, at a minimum, I would add some zigzag underlay at a minimum. And I would probably just leave it at whatever the default setting is. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I don't really think contour underlay is really all that necessary. It's certainly not going to hurt, but I don't really think, because of the tiny satin column, it's not necessarily that important. Now, on the compensation, yes. So first of all, this satin column is really tiny. You know, and once you stitch this out, you'll see that this is a really tiny satin column. So if we, let me first over exaggerate compensation for you by doing 80% on both sides, just to show you what that really is doing. So this was the original, you see the contour underlay? That's one of the reasons I added the contour. But you see how much those stitches are overlapping the contour? They're overlapping a lot, okay? So now the satin stitches are really, really wide, all right? So like I said, that was kind of to the extreme, but I just wanted to show you what's really happening there. So we can do it by percentage, or we can do it by set dimension. So, for example, we measured that and it was 1.8. So if we wanted to bump that up to, say, 3, what we could do is we could add, let's do maybe 0.4 of a millimeter on both sides. And that, while that's not quite 3, you see how much the stitches are overhanging, right? That may be more desirable. And when those stitches start to pull, they'll not be really this big. They'll look that big on the screen here, but when it actually stitches out, it's not that wide. And once you've played around with these settings a little bit and actually stitched them out, you'll kind of know, okay, well, do I want to use 0.3 or 0.4? I think 0.4 is going to work fine. But again, until we stitch it out, we honestly won't know. And it's ultimately, it really is personal preference there. Now, on the other bits, these little bits of the bow, okay, I do want to set some different params. And so what we're not going to do is we're not going to add zigzag underlay. It's too tiny. So zigzag underlay is not necessary. In fact, I don't think any underlay is necessary. Ooh, we got an issue here. Good thing we saw that. So there, we'll have to take a look at that and see what's happening there. But let's go ahead and add the compensation. Let's go ahead and do that. And let's just do, I don't know, 0.2 maybe. And that will just thicken it up a little bit. So we were at 0.75. So by adding 0.2, we're going to push it to about 1 millimeter. So I don't know, maybe we'll do 0.3. Let's just thicken it up even more. And I think that'll be fine. So we're going to add 0.3. Now this is to each side. So we were at 0.75, and then we're adding 0.3. So now this satin column is roughly 1.5 millimeters. So now we're in the good zone. Okay, let's go ahead and choose apply and quit. Now, there is an issue over here, and I don't know what the issue is. So let's look at it. So the first thing I want to do is, sometimes the easiest thing is just to go ahead and simplify it. Okay. Now, if we look at just that piece, did that fix our issue? We're going to find out. And it did. Okay. So sometimes it's just as simple as that. Now, let's go ahead and look at it together like we just had it before. Make sure that that really did fix it. But usually there's some node on top of a node, something there that's causing the issue. All right, perfect. Now, one thing I do want to point out while we're here, notice how this satin is covering up that satin just a little bit, and that's, that's ultimately what we want. Now, we do have something that's fun, always challenging to deal with, and that is this big jump stitch. How do we handle this? Well, let's talk about that. So we are stitching this, right? And then we're stitching this, okay? And so what we have to do is, the software is going to, by default, it's going to create a jump stitch. Boop. And we obviously don't want a jump stitch. And the fact of the matter is, most of your embroidery designs that you buy, they don't take this step that we're about to take. And ultimately, those embroidery designs are very, very difficult to fix after it's embroidered. So we want to eliminate jump stitches and thread trims at all costs. And this is an important part of the process that most people just skip right over. If you're doing a commercial embroidery job and I have to stitch out 100 of these, I don't want to have to come in here and trim 100 of those threads at the end. Not if I can take care of it right here, right now. Now, you can't always avoid the jump stitches, not in every scenario, but in this scenario, absolutely, it's really easy. So we select that shape and then shift select the next piece, and then we have to do something called if you go into extensions and InkStitch and come down here to tool stroke, we're going to do here, jump stitch to a stroke. And so when we do that, we have these settings, and I just kind of leave this just the way I have it set up here. So it's saying anything that is less than 2 millimeters, don't count that as a jump. But if it's more than that, then go ahead and convert. Okay. So let's go ahead and choose apply. And now you see this line has appeared. And all we have to do for this line, there is a stroke now, is just edit it however we want to. And we're going to bury it inside this future satin. Okay. So now when we look at this, we'll just go, let me point this out. If we go into params, and this is the thing that's a little bit frustrating. I don't care if it is supposed to work that way. It's dumb. It's very dumb. So despite what everyone else says, it's a dumb way to work. So notice that jump stitch still exists. Now, my opinion is that jump stitch should not exist. It doesn't belong there. So in order to see those edits that we just made actually materialize into something, what we would have to do is we would have to go into simulator. So if we go to extensions, InkStitch, visualize and export, and there's simulator, and now we will see that running stitch, that stroke that we just created. Now you see it is in fact really there like it's supposed to be. I don't understand the logic and why it's not showing that to us in params. It just boggles my mind. Because I just don't understand why it would do that. But at any rate, now, if we go ahead and look at this, let's just go ahead and do it in simulator. Because that's the only way we're going to see that edit happen like it's supposed to. Now we have another challenge. because we have this jump stitch that we should not have. Okay, so we have to fix that. And how are we going to go about fixing that? Well, it's pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead and close this out, and let's take a look at that. So now this piece is this piece of the bow is the last piece to stitch, and then we're jumping from there all the way over here. Okay, and so what we're going to do is take that last piece of our bow and shift click our left ear, and we're going to go into extensions, InkStitch, tool stroke, and notice we have Control Alt J because we use that all the time. We'll go ahead and hit apply. Now, the software is set up to automatically make the closest connection. Okay, so if you look here, if you look at this piece and then you look at the ear, that in fact is the closest connection. All right, so that's just how it's designed for, but we're not going to do that. We are going to move this, so we don't want it to be there, we want it to be way up here. Okay, and then what we're going to do, so it's saying that this is finishing right there basically. So then what we're going to do is we're going to just double click with our node tool, and we're going to bury this line. Now, what's the quickest path? Well, the quickest path is probably just to go up this way. So we're just double clicking, adding a node. And like I said, this is the part most folks don't take the time to do. But if we just take the time to do it, we will be able to have a very nice stitch out. It's only adding a couple of stitches, so it's not, you know, a couple hundred stitches, whatever. It's not too much there. So now when it finishes this object, it's going to be full speed all the way up to here, and then it's going to start stitching the next object. And then we don't have no jumps. Problem solved. So now we're going to go back into Simulator. So we have to go into Simulator to see it. So let's do that. Go back into Simulator. But you see that running stitch, and so let's go ahead and back this up, back it up. So we're doing those, and you see that running stitch all the way over to the top, and then it's starting our ear, coming down, finishing that, all the way around and done. And there you go. You have a very nice, proper design with if we go to Info tab, 0 jumps, 0 trims. And that, folks, is what you want. So there you go. So in all reality, it might take me 5 minutes. If I was going to sit down and actually do the design, 5-10 minutes at most, and the design is complete and perfect, and it's going to stitch out very, very nice. But it's just a process of learning all the little things that we have to learn along the way to make sure that we have the perfect stitch results that we want. All right, so that's it. So we will save this design. So we'll hit File, Save As, and we'll save it as the Mickey, or I guess it really should be Minnie, huh? So Minnie monogram outline. She's going to add some kind of lettering inside for the monogram for her granddaughter. So there you go. And then, of course, we could save it to whatever embroidery file format we needed from there. So if you want this design just as it is in Inkscape format, shoot us an email in the video description below. We'll send it to you, no problem. And if you have a design that you want to see demonstrated, feel free to send it to us to that same email address. We'll take a look at it. Maybe we can make you a video demonstration as well. It's much easier, I think, and more enjoyable to watch these videos if we're actually creating something in the process of learning all the different things that we need to learn. Thanks for watching.